Biden speaks out at the crisis on the southern border by blasting U.S. Border Patrol agents. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki continues to say that the Hunter Biden laptop story is Russian disinformation. Plus, we'll hear from our special guest, former Trump advisor and CEO of GETTR, Jason Miller. All that and more. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a Saturday live stream.
And God bless the United States of America.
Okay, friends, welcome to the show. Happy Saturday. I hope you had a great week. If you're new to the show, thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to start with Joe Biden because after months of silence and inaction regarding the absolute crisis occurring at our southern border, Biden has decided to speak out and take action. Is he restarting construction on Trump's border wall? Are you kidding? Is he reinstating the Remain in Mexico policy? No, but he was told to do so by the courts. No. Actions that Joe Biden is taking in the Harris administration, they are against not the illegal border crossers. Biden is going after the Border Patrol agents who are trying to do their jobs. The border crisis took center stage this week as over 10,000 Haitians suddenly arrived at the border. Joe Biden said he was going to turn them away, but we know that many are just being let in. Business as usual for the Biden administration. But then the unthinkable happened. Border Patrol agents on horseback tried to keep people from illegally crossing. Enter Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and the media with their new talking point. These cowboys on horseback were actually whipping illegal border crossers, whipping them. That was the story. As an example, just listen to Maxine Waters.
I'm unhappy, and I'm not just unhappy with the cowboys who were running down Haitians and using their reins to whip them. I'm happy with the administration. We are following the Trump policy. He is the one that does not follow the Constitution and would not allow those seeking refuge to be able to petition to get into the country. What the hell are we doing here?
Cowboys. Waters spreads this completely false story of agents whipping people, and there's no fallout. But she doesn't stop there. Of course, no Democrat outrage would be complete if they didn't bring racism to it. Here's more from Waters.
What we witnessed takes us back hundreds of years. What we witnessed was worse than what we witnessed in slavery. Cowboys with their reins again whipping black people, Haitians, into the water where they're scrambling and falling down when all they're trying to do is escape from violence in their country.
Yes, this is just worse than slavery, according to Maxine Waters. And just exactly what is so outrageous? What are these Border Patrol agents doing? Their job. Check it out. Border Patrol agents trying to secure the border. And this has led to outrage from the Biden team. And it's just perfect timing. Joe Biden needs to be seen as doing something, so rather than help solve the problem, he just made it worse by promoting the left-wing position of attacking law enforcement officials rather than working to enforce the law. Here's Biden on Friday talking about Border Patrol agents on horseback.
To see people treated like they did, horses really running them over, people being strapped, it's outrageous. I promise you those people will pay. They will be, an investigation underway now, and there will be consequences. There will be consequences.
It's just outrageous. Biden talks about consequences. Any consequences after 13 Americans were killed in Afghanistan? Not yet. Any consequences for Biden's ISIS-K drone strike that didn't actually kill any members of ISIS-K, but did kill 10 civilians, including 7 children? Any consequences for that? Of course, Kamala Harris joined in as well, since she's absolutely useless unless she's needed to blast Border Patrol agents. Here's Harris.
I was outraged by it. It was horrible and deeply troubling. There's been now an investigation that is being conducted, which I fully support, and there needs to be consequence and accountability. Human beings should not be treated that way.
That's America's border czar. She's done nothing about the actual crisis at the border, but she has no problem bashing the people who are trying to help. Of course, the Border Patrol agents and their representatives are beyond outraged, and they are speaking out. The problem is that the media are in bed with the Biden administration, and the Biden administration wants open borders. I can't imagine what morale must be like when agents hear comments like the ones from Biden and Harris. We desperately need to get the situation under control and have some real accountability. The border is being overrun, and Joe Biden swore an oath to defend the Constitution and the United States. All right, so next let's talk about White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki and the Hunter Biden laptop. But first, if you're new to the show or haven't subscribed yet, regardless of platform, just search out my name, hit that subscribe button, make sure notifications are turned on. That way you can follow the show and help us grow. Okay, so next we have White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki and Hunter Biden's laptop. The laptop is back in the news, and Psaki is repeating the same old talking points. We've known for a long time that the information contained on Hunter Biden's laptop is real. It's his laptop with his emails and documents and notes on it. We know the big guy is Joe Biden. Despite all of the facts, the media buried the story. They flat out censored it. And actually, I'm going to ask Jason Miller about that in a few minutes. But this week, the publication Politico came out and verified that the information on Hunter Biden's laptop was indeed authentic. Okay, congratulations for that effort, even though we already knew it. However, despite this information from Politico, Jen Psaki is sticking with the talking points. Here's the story. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki on Friday insisted that emails recovered from Hunter Biden's discarded laptop computer were Russian disinformation, despite new confirmation of the authenticity of the emails. The emails show President Biden's son Hunter cashing in on the family name in business deals in China and Ukraine. That confirmation refers to a new book that is coming out from one of Politico's reporters that backs up what was originally reported last year. Here's more. The emails, which were published in the New York Post just weeks ahead of last year's presidential election, were widely dismissed by news media outlets and President Biden declaring it Russian disinformation. After some of the Post's reporting was confirmed as true this week, the White House stuck to claims that it was part of a Kremlin operation. I think it's broadly known and widely known that there was a broad range of Russian disinformation back in 2020, Ms. Psaki said Friday. It's amazing. Just like the Border Patrol agents on horseback, the left will say anything to advance their narrative. It doesn't have to be true. It doesn't have to follow the science. Whatever will promote the left-wing agenda of power and control is on the table. Facts don't matter, and Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Jen Psaki prove it every single time they speak. All right, so next we have our special guest, Jason Miller. Mr. Miller is an American communications strategist, former Trump senior advisor, and CEO. On July 4th, our guest launched GETTR, a new social media platform which celebrates free speech, rejects cancel culture, and provides best-in-class technology and user experience. GETTR is the fastest growing social media app in history with almost 2 million users. Jason, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, it's great to be with you.
Well, I appreciate you being here. There's so much to go over. I know our audience is very excited about this. I want to take a step back before we get to the big crunch that drove you to found and launch GETTR, which is just incredible. But let's take a step back, say to December 2019, January 2020, before COVID really hit as far as the American people were concerned. What was it like in the Trump campaign? What were you guys thinking about, strategizing, and thinking how things were going?
Well, great question. So keep in mind, right around that stretch, that was one of the throes of impeachment witch hunt number one. And so at that time, I had just founded War Room Impeachment with Steve Bannon, and we were already, I don't know, a couple hundred episodes or so into that. helping to lead kind of that defense for President Trump. And as you remember back in the fall, especially in the October, November stretch, we actually had a number of Republicans that were getting pretty weak kneed or said, maybe if President Trump just gets out there and says, oh, it was a bad phone call, I wish I hadn't done it, please forgive me, then maybe folks won't vote for impeachment, or I should have done something differently, which of course is just totally hogwash. I mean, as soon as you start ceding ground on such things, then you're giving away your entire hand. But then
Right.
as we rounded the quarter going into January, after we'd already cleared the House of Representatives without a single Republican defecting, then we were heading into what was going to be the Senate trial, or have the Senate start reviewing this, and so we knew we were in good shape. And but at that same time, that's when we really started seeing COVID start to rise, and that was something as Steve and I then launched War Room Pandemic and started going into that we realized this was going to be something that would have a massive impact on 2020. Had not yet hit really the broader American public, but we saw that this is the direction of where this was going to go. And of course, I didn't rejoin the Trump campaign until end of May, beginning of June. I think it was June 1, actually, of 2020. But I saw at that point that, yes, the public numbers for President Trump were really, really good, but I was
Mhm.
concerned about COVID.
Oh, wow. Okay. So let's, yeah, as you brought up that first impeachment, we didn't have, for the record, any House defections back then. But that pressure that you were talking about from the weak-kneed Republicans, was that Senate side, House side, a little combination? Give me a flavor for that.
Yeah, no, this is a really, really important question because I don't think I've ever really kind of fleshed this out. But we were getting reports that there were upwards of, say, 2 dozen, maybe 3 dozen Republicans that were getting weak kneed in some of the early days. And
Hmm.
keep in mind the traditional strategy in Washington is just go in and fall on the sword, or say that you did X, Y, and Z wrong, and then they get their pound of flesh and they'll let you go. But as you started looking at some of the numbers and things that we were hearing, it was actually a little bit concerning. And so what we did is started kind of building that backstop to really make sure folks knew that, hey, you're either with Nancy Pelosi or you're with President Trump, and there's no in between on this. And we're successful with having a holding 100% of all Republicans in the House during that stretch. There were some folks, look, I'm not going to go throw them necessarily under the bus at the moment, but even some people that were pretty staunch defenders of President Trump's, or at least they appear to be, here saying he just needs to come out and say that he did some things wrong, and then he'll be okay and be able to survive. Fortunately, President Trump, as well as ourselves, we rejected that really bad advice, and he's able to get through literally with zero Republican defections out of the House.
Well, good for you, Jason, and the former President Trump, because it's just so typical of the mindset of some of these Republicans to fall for the Democrat tactics. You know, it's just they want you. They think that, hey, you do apologize a little bit, and then it's all going to be good. But then it's just going to be the next step. It's like, oh man, he actually did something wrong. We need to really get him out of there. So kudos to you, but I assume that some of this was the Cheneys and Kinsingers that were starting to rumble. So then you make it through that, which was great, except for, I believe Romney was one of the sticklers there, but I'm glad there was no House defections. How does that carry you into the 2020 with COVID, adjusting that to the campaign?
Yeah, so there's this really kind of this awkward stretch because we're coming out of this point. I mean, President Trump, the high point of his numbers were right after he was cleared coming out of the impeachment witch hunt number one. But we saw at the same time, during January of 2020, keep in mind you had the Chinese delegation come to the U.S. You had Chinese delegation then went to Davos that following week. And at this time, we were tracking all the events that were happening in Wuhan in advance of the Chinese New Year, where in China, they'd already cut off travel from Wuhan to the rest of the country.
Mhm.
You couldn't actually travel from Wuhan to Beijing, but you could go from Wuhan to say, JFK or to Los Angeles or to points beyond.
Oh,
So we
wow.
were watching this pretty closely, and especially the efforts by the CCP to shut down any of this discussion. And so it was this kind of this weird moment. President Trump got this big trade deal with China. He gets cleared with regard to impeachment. The economic numbers were doing great, but we knew that we had this big iceberg off in the distance in COVID-19. And even though it had not yet hit the U.S., had not exploded, knew it was a very perilous time. And so knew at the outset here that this was something that would become a global pandemic. Reason why when we launched the show in January of 2020, we call it pandemic, because we knew it was a worldwide event. And it was a kind of a time of rejoicing that President Trump was in good shape, but also knowing that, hey, 2020 was going to be pretty bumpy.
Right, right. All right. So there's kind of the microcosm, the look at what's going on your side. What did you guys think of what was going on the other side? I mean, you started with all of these candidates, Elizabeth Warrens and Cory Bookers and Klobuchars and all of this stuff. As it's whittling down, I'm sure you had internal polling. But what was the vibe you were getting? Because I mean, just on my side, talking to friends and folks, it was like they don't want Bernie Sanders. We don't want to go against some far leftist and everything. We didn't expect that Biden, of all people, would emerge being so weak as he was. What was it like inside looking at the Democrats?
Well, if you go back to that very first Democratic debate, Kamala Harris really shone. She had that moment where she really put Joe Biden back in his place. And then following that, then obviously the bloom started coming off the rose a little bit with regard to Kamala Harris. We saw Mike Bloomberg get in, start spending money. I never subscribed to the issue that Bloomberg was going to be a big, massive juggernaut. I always thought that he was just too far out of step with the hardcore crazies within the Democratic constituency. But then also, as we talked about Joe Biden, I, to be honest with you, didn't think that he would make it out either, for the simple fact that he had done so terribly in 1988. You might remember his plagiarism of Neil Kinnock. You might remember back to 2008 when he face planted, and somehow Barack Obama pulled him off the ash heap of history and said, Uncle Joe, can you be my my vice president? I never thought that Biden, just because he's a terrible campaigner, he's really bad on the campaign trail, would ever elevate. But just everybody else was so terrible, they kind of had no other options.
Yeah, that's amazing you said that, because people, they talk about this obvious. My wife's a neurologist, and she can see the obvious mental decline. But he was gaffing from 1988 onward. So that's partly why I didn't think that he would emerge, because he always says weird stuff as he goes along. But now, we're into the summer. It's COVID is really cracking down. How did that play in the campaign, as far as the president's obvious urge to want to be out there and rally and get people going, and balancing that contrasting that with Biden, who never left the basement?
Yeah, great question, because as we saw COVID was raging, of course, President Trump wanted to get out there. Of course, the campaign had a bit of a false start with regard to the Tulsa rally. But one of the bigger, I think, kind of constructs to keep in mind over the summer is really had kind of two different Americas that were going on. You had Fox News was talking about the BLM riots, the chaos in Portland, the Chaz in Seattle, which, by the way, I was actually born in the Chaz, if you go back 46 years ago. So I'd always thought about returning to be the warlord of Chaz or something of that nature, except
Nice,
then
you'd have to dethrone one. There was one, so.
But then I'd have to live back in Seattle. So then I realized that was a bad idea. There's a reason why I got out of there as soon as I could. So on Fox News, and with a lot of our allies, whether it be Newsmax, OAN, kind of the broader right of center, we're covering so much of the rabid, out of control left, the violence going on over the summer. But then you had which obviously was happening, but then you had these left of center outlets, i.e. everybody else, fake news, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CBS, etc., who literally paid no attention to the violence and chaos going on in the streets, but all they showed were COVID, and effectively presenting President Trump as, if you didn't know any better, you'd think President Trump single-handedly injected every single American who got COVID with the disease. And so you kind of had these two Americas that were going on. So obviously President Trump, much of his superpower is bypassing the media, getting out there and talking directly to folks. And it made it definitely made it a little bit more challenging because Joe Biden could just sit in his basement in Delaware, and ostensibly he was working on COVID recovery plans, although we know he's probably either sleeping or playing pinochle or something of the sort. And so it was frustrating. We wanted to get back out there, but of course it was just very difficult with COVID.
Right. You mentioned bypassing the media. Well, that comes into effect when you have an outlet that you can bypass them in. You know, you can go to social media. So now we're in the summer and we see this clampdown just really stepping up as far as Facebook censoring and Twitter banning and that kind of out. So he's not going to be, getting a fair shake on CNN or MSNBC. Now he can't get his voice out as much on these outlets. So how did that affect you from like the digital campaign strategy at that point?
Well, what it did was it essentially elevated anything that was coming out of the White House. And so even some of those things weren't necessarily ideal. So, for example, when Anthony Fauci would go and issue his craziness, or even Dr. Birx, who sometimes was on our side, sometimes wasn't on our side, they basically put all the focus to the governing side. So essentially, when you're in the White House, you're playing defense. It's very hard to actually play offense when you're in the White House. Right? It's very much the media points at you and they attack, whereas the campaign is really that entity for you to be on offense, for you to drive your message. And being constrained, then in a sense, President Trump was artificially put on his back foot through much of the summer and even heading into the early fall with much more difficulty in being able to drive a message.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what shocked me the most is like there was always this confrontational nature with President Trump and the media. So we saw that. But when the Hunter Biden story broke and you had the New York Post putting out legitimate news stories that were banned on Twitter and Facebook, then you really saw that this was up a new level. And I think they were I wanted to get your take on this idea that by going after former President Trump and seeing what they could do there, that they were just emboldened and kind of went after the rest of us and put that story down. They weren't going to let that affect this election at all and just basically do anything they can to stop Trump.
Yeah, and that's, I recently wrote an op-ed in the Washington Times saying this has been the worst year for censorship in American history. And as we talk about whether people being shadow banned or deplatformed or censored because they dared to say that the virus came from a lab in Wuhan, which, spoiler alert, it did. Going into the summer when people are being put in digital timeout for criticizing Dr. Anthony Fauci, even though he flip-flops literally every single day. So it's, how many opinions does he have? It depends which day of the week it is. But then the most egregious example was the Hunter Biden laptop drama. And I think a lot of people kind of forget with that. They think, oh, Hunter Biden, this is the picture of him with the feather boa. This is him with two young ladies in a room with the dog watching. That's not what this is about. None of that embarrassing stuff. What this is about were the business deals or the alleged business deals that he was pursuing that really shone light on Biden Inc. And why this is important is this was much a connection to 2016 and a reminder of Clinton Inc., where crooked Hillary, clearly had sold access over and over to both Bill and to herself. And it reminded people of the status quo and the problems of everything going on. The Bidens, or you can make a case, are actually worse, not just from Hunter selling access left or right, literally flying on Air Force Two to go to China to come away with a business deal. But then also think about Frank and James, Joe's brothers, who literally been selling access to Joe for a half century.
Right. Yeah. All of those names came out from all of these interviews, all the stories that eventually did get out about the laptop. But that brings us to kind of this central thesis here is that with big tech clamping down on everybody, there needs to be an outlet. There has to be a way that we can still get our message out. And that brings, I'm just fascinated to know the story and the buildup behind GETTR and what those meetings were like before you decided that, yep, this is the time to do this and we're going to launch this new platform.
Well, exactly. And so I knew that, it's one of those, if you're reading this message, it's already too late with regard to 2020. And so by the time we got to the Hunter Biden laptop scandal that was suppressed by Twitter and Facebook, I mean, here's the oldest paper in the United States, the New York Post, with very reputable reporting about the Hunter hard drives, and again, all the business deals and everything that was brought to light. And these big tech oligarchs said, nope, you're not going to be able to share it, not going to be able to talk about it. We're going to completely suppress this in an effort to go and help Biden in the election. And a Media Research Center after the election, and they're polling, 1 out of every 6 Biden voters would have considered going a different direction, or would likely have been changing their votes if they'd known about this scandal and it hadn't been suppressed. Then, of course, President Trump gets kicked off after January 6th, and we realize we're in completely uncharted territory where some folks' First Amendment rights no longer matter. So after President Trump left office, I started essentially being exposed to being around a number of these alternative social media platforms or ideas for them. And some people would come to President Trump and say things like, I have a great concept for a new social media platform, but we need 25 or 30 million bucks from you. It's going to take a year to develop. Or some people would say, we have a fully ready platform. You may or may not have heard of it. It's ready to go, but the technology was terrible, had already had crashes before, different things like that. And so then, as soon as I got connected with the folks who were starting to develop GETTR, I realized the technology was there, the ticket was there. They had the same essentially philosophical underpinning that we need to have a place for free speech. And also, the thing that really impressed me was that they wanted to take this global from day one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things where I thought some of the previous platforms had gotten pigeonholed. That they're just going to be United States right of center alternative social media platform. When I saw these guys had the vision that really matched with mine, let's go and take this global. They had the resources to put behind it. They needed some leadership, though, who could take it to the next level. And I said, you know what? I got to jump on board this. And that's why I left President Trump in June. And we launched this on July 4th.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. And it seems like you guys have done the homework and gotten everything in line on like a couple aspects. One, as far as the safeguards, it doesn't look like you've run into problems with Apple or Google on their stores as far as app availability. I mean, you have those. And then as far as the back end, as far as your databases and your servers and everything, all's good on that end. Amazon's not going to shut you down.
No, I think we're in good shape, and we have very proactive and robust moderation standards. And this is a place where I spent a lot of my time, because if you want to have this digital town square, if you want to have a place where nobody will ever be censored or deplatformed for their political beliefs, you have to make sure it's a safe environment. So what does that mean? That means you can't have doxing, you can't have people threatening illegal things. I mean, you can't rely on, as Parler found out, you can't say we're going to rely on community policing to shut down efforts by child porn people or ISIS or any of this. You have to make sure it's a safe environment. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you're not going in as a platform playing judge, jury, and executioner with people's free speech rights, or that you're treating different groups differently. And so where we've been able to establish as our North Star is that when it comes to your political beliefs, we're going to make sure that you're never going to be put in digital timeout or have those rights taken away. But we're going to make sure that, like any smart platform, you don't allow illegal activity, and you make sure it's an inviting place for people to join.
So do you think that that we're going to have to wait until 2022, 2024 for legislative action on this? Are there any Democrats that want to do anything about big tech, Section 230? I mean, what's your opinions on that? Remove it, reform it? What do you think going forward?
Well, so I think Section 230 has to be reformed. I mean, effectively, the platform protection rights have been granted, what they weren't strong enough to account. And this is why we've seen legislation from Florida, in Texas, it's being debated in Wisconsin, Iowa, and heck, even internationally. Obviously, 230 wouldn't cover folks internationally, but we've even seen President Bolsonaro from Brazil going past things saying that you can't go and discriminate based on political posts or political opinions. So that's really where there needs to be an adjustment to 230 to say that if you want to be a platform, you want to be essentially have that shield from any aspect of liability for what's posted on there. You can't go and pick winners or losers based on who you tend to agree with or who you like. It has to be based on either adhering to laws, keeping people safe, those types of things. And so when we think about, does Section 230 have to be reformed? Of course. My worry is that the big tech lobbies are so powerful on Capitol Hill that it's never actually going to get done. And also, quite frankly, I think the courts either so feckless or so triggered by President Trump that they'll look for any excuse to not side with him. And so, short of having much confidence in either the courts or Congress to get things done, that's part of the reason why we launched GETTR and said, you know what, let's just come up with technology that's better than what Silicon Valley has and go beat them at their own game.
Well, that's an awesome strategy. And folks out there, just like on other social media platforms, Bobby Eberle 13, I'm on GETTR. Please check that out. I need to ask you, you mentioned about Brazil. You were down in I believe it was a CPAC event down in Brazil where you ran into some problems. What was the government doing over there?
So Brazil, and I'd heard this quite a bit, that they have this rogue, out of control Supreme Court. What I didn't quite realize or appreciate before I went down, their Supreme Court justices, of course, we imagine, like John Roberts or Clarence Thomas, or, the more crazies like Sonia Sotomayor or Elena Kagan, sitting there in the black robes and looking very regal and weighing on, highfalutin matters that come in front of the court. In Brazil, a Supreme Court justice, which, by the way, they can act unilaterally on almost anything they want, they're effectively a roll-up of, say, Elena Kagan, but plus Merrick Garland, plus Jim Comey, plus Bob Mueller, plus Adam Schiff, plus Jerry Nadler, into a pretty ugly-looking character there. And they're effectively individual prosecutors who are unchecked and do whatever they want. And so a gentleman by the name of Alexander de Moraes, who's one of the Supreme Court justices, think Blofeld from James Bond, except uglier.
Right.
And that's really who, this guy literally, like if he had a white Persian cat, he would be Blofeld. He'd be like, oh, this is Blofeld. How did he land a position on Brazil's high court? He's been in a long running feud with President Bolsonaro. And there's an effort in Brazil, I think, to intentionally undermine and undercut Bolsonaro supporters from having a platform where they can have communications and discuss political issues of the day in advance of Brazil's elections this next October 2022. And so as we were leaving, go through airport security, heading to our plane, we're there for CPAC Brazil, which great production, put together very well, very impressive run. Spent some time with President Bolsonaro, but as we're leaving, the secret police say, Mr. Miller, we'd like you to come with us. And we go to a federal detention area where they proceed to spend 3 hours wanting to ask questions. And some of it was just comical. So, for example, none of the agents actually spoke English. I don't speak Portuguese. So they went and got one of the baggage handlers, the airport concierge, to come in and translate, to which I was saying, hey, guys, I'm like, I understand this is a political brushback pitch. You're just trying to scare me off from returning to Brazil. But should you really have someone with like the yellow reflective vest that's coming in and doing the translating? Like, this wouldn't hold up in a court of law in any country. And then they put a document in front of me that was 5 pages long and, of course, written in Portuguese. They said, if you just sign this, saying that you have nothing to say, then you can go. I'm like, I'm not signing a 5-page document in Portuguese. Like, time out. So they went in and started asking some questions like, why are you here? Like, well, I'm here for CPAC Brazil. Who do you represent? I'm like, well, I'm the CEO of GETTR, so I'm here representing GETTR, and fastest growing social media platform in history. Would love to get you on the platform. And then here's where it started to go kind of to the crazy level, where you realize that free speech isn't necessarily always that free. They said, Mr. Miller, we would like you to tell us everybody who you've met with or spoken with in Brazil about GETTR, who might be helping you. And by the way, we also want to know everybody in Brazil who's on the platform. At which point I said, nope, let's call the embassy. I want a lawyer. This little exercise is over. I'm not going to start offering people up so they can then be harassed by the secret police. It's nothing more than a political brushback pitch. So able to leave, but quite frankly, I do worry for people who, say, citizens of Brazil who believe in free speech and want to exercise their philosophies and their ideals. Who do they get to call? Who do they get to call for help to do something as simple as saying we're concerned about election integrity or COVID handling?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you hit your level, right? You hit your level in that questioning. And so it's like, man, I'm calling the embassy. But what do these folks do if they're getting shaken down or intimidated or or who knows what disappearing. I mean, that sounds like the craziest thing. I mean, this I love the reflector analogy. This guy is the official state interpreter for Brazil. It just doesn't make any sense. But
No, and there was even one other thing I'd say is when I first got in, this is one of my favorites. So I asked them, I was, just a question, am I under arrest? And they said no. I go, can I leave? And they go, well, you have some questions you need to answer first. So I'm like, come on. I'm like, they're like either you're under arrest or you're not. So,
right, yeah,
but it's
exactly.
clearly a Keystone Cops operation. But I will tell you that I love Brazil. I love the people of Brazil.
Mhm.
Brazil's about 15% of our user base. Over several 100,000 Brazilians are on GETTR.
Oh,
And
nice.
now with our new translate feature, where you can easily read what President Bolsonaro or his sons Eduardo or Flavio and all the Ana Paula Henkel, who's their greatest volleyball athlete of all time, who's on the platform, Carol DeTony, who's writing their version of their First Amendment, who's currently working on that in their Congress. Just some really cool people that I got to meet on the trip, and I can't wait to go back.
Wow, what an awesome trip. All right, so let's wrap up with 2024. Who's running for president?
Well, I can tell you who I think will run on the Republican side. I say I think because, of course, no formal decision, and I don't want to get myself in any trouble with President Trump. But I do think that President Trump runs in 2024. I think that he's the Republican nominee. He's still the flag bearer for the party. I think, especially as people look and see what's happening at the southern border, they see the Afghanistan disaster, they see the chaos in the Middle East, they see China's extension of the 9-dash line, now essentially going to Honolulu. China's really unchecked, especially with their flyovers over Taiwan and the way that they're becoming increasingly aggressive with the South China Sea. Hyperinflation at home. People are saying, "Yikes, Joe Biden! I thought you were gonna. I thought if we just had all the mean tweets stopped, that you would fix these things. But in fact, he's actually created all these crises." I think President Trump will be the Republican nominee. I got to tell you, on the Democrat side, I don't know if President Trump will be going up against a Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom. I don't see Biden being in a position to run again. I'm not sure if Biden's going to even hang on for a full term. He just doesn't seem to be all there. And that's not from a partisan perspective. Spend 5 minutes watching him, and there's something that's clearly wrong with the guy. Kamala Harris is no world beater either. And even during the Afghanistan crisis, they sent her to the other side of the planet, to Singapore, and to basically try to just get her away so she couldn't screw anything up. So I don't know. Is this where we see a Gavin Newsom come ride to the rescue? Do we see one of the other Democratic upstarts? Is this third time a charm for Bernie Sanders? Who knows?
Yeah, it's just a matter of how far left the electorate goes. They're singing praises in California, like surviving the recall is some kind of mandate for left-wing policies. It's just outrageous. But yeah, I'm excited about 2024 and 2022. I totally agree that the opponent in 2024 for the Democrats is just a big, wide open. I don't know. Harris can't hang. Biden probably won't make it because the Democrats, I don't think they want to put up a loser. And Trump's trouncing both of them in polling right now. Did you think it would be this bad in just 9 months in?
No. In fact, I went and visited President Trump a couple of weeks ago, and we sat down. And the one thing I could tell is because there's very much this laser-like focus with President Trump right now, and of course, even before he left office, he was talking about potentially coming back and running in 2024. But he didn't have that same level of focus that we're seeing now. And I don't think even President Trump could have predicted that every single thing that he said could happen under Joe Biden would start happening. But it seems Joe Biden just literally seems to have created all of these crises at the same time. And it's clear that we need someone to go and turn the country around. The good news is we saw how good things can be under President Trump. And I don't think any of these things are permanent or irreversible. Obviously, something like in Afghanistan, those 13 servicemen and women are never going to get their lives back. And so some of these are permanent things. When we talk about kind of domestically, whether it be the hyperinflation or getting even internationally, let's say getting China back in check or some of these other things, there's still time to turn around. But I tell you, Bobby, we don't have much time. And I worry about what Biden's going to do even in the remaining 3 years.
Yeah, it's really scary when people think about that. And you mentioned the mean tweets. I say that on my show all the time because I talk to people who they always would phrase it with this starting. They say, I'm a Republican, but I'm going to vote for Joe Biden this time. And I tell them, it's like, what single policy is he going to do that you agree with? Well, I don't like the mean tweets. Well, look at what we get, man. It's just outrageous. But Jason, I appreciate you being here. You want to make one more push. Where can people, if they want to get on GETTR, what can they do?
Absolutely. So I would say go to the Apple App Store, type in GETTR, GETTR. Same thing at the Google Play Store if you have a Samsung or an Android, GETTR, or even just go to GETTR.com, the website. Real quick and easy to download and sign up for the platform. You're going to see the functionality. It looks really smooth. The technology is great. It's very easy to install and get going. And again, we support free speech. We oppose cancel culture. I think those are two pretty no-brainer fundamental underpinnings. And there's so many fun people who've joined just this week. We've had Enes Kanter, the center for the Boston Celtics, jump on. Our first NBA player, Gina Carano from Mandalorian. Jorge Masvidal and Chael Sonnen from the UFC. Of course, all your favorite conservatives like Dinesh D'Souza and Steve Bannon and Mike Pompeo. We even have folks who are left of center. Naomi Wolf, who's a pretty outspoken feminist, is on the platform. So it's a great discussion. Come check it out.
Awesome. Well, Jason, I'd love to have you back on the show again. This discussion it could just keep going, but I appreciate you for being here.
All right. Thanks, Bobby.
That was such a great discussion with Jason Miller. And at least according to him, there's a pretty good chance that Trump runs in 2024. So what do you think about what Jason was saying? Can GETTR thrive against the big tech giants? Let me know in the comments. All right. So I want to take a few minutes to thank all the people who have supported the show episode after episode with super chats, with contributions, with jokes. Jay Koch always throwing in something funny. All of our friends and moderators, Marjorie, Jeff Barry, LD, and the RSBN crew. You guys are absolutely awesome. If you have any questions for me before we sign off, I'll be happy to take them. I'll look down at the chat a little bit. Appreciate you, Okiag, for the shout out. Jason Miller was absolutely awesome. I can't wait to talk to him again. So much knowledge. It was just, and I love how he's pretty confident that Trump's going to run again. So this was all good. But folks, I hope you guys have an awesome weekend. I'm going to wrap things up because I want to get to my weekend too. And I'm just so pumped after talking to Jason Miller. So that's our show for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. But don't forget, if you're new to the show or haven't subscribed yet, regardless of platform, just search out my name, hit that subscribe button, make sure notifications are turned on. That way you can follow the show and help us grow. Okay, our next show is Monday at the usual time, 6:30 p.m. Central on my channel and 8:30 p.m. on Right Side Broadcasting. Until then, I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a Saturday live stream. All right, friends, thanks again for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And before you go, please hit that subscribe button above. Once you do, tell your friends, share it, spread the word about the 13-minute news hour so we can keep growing. And for more great content, check out these videos right here, and I'll see you next time.